How's it going, guys? Yak and Tackle Northwest here. Today's video I am going to be showing everybody how to do an easy, fairly waterproof battery box for several different applications. Mine will be used for powering a fish finder on a kayak. So to start off, this is the battery that I will be using, purchased off of Amazon, and the box that I will be using, also purchased off of Amazon. Both of these I will include links at the end of the video and in the description. That way it is easy to find them. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a list of everything that I bought and that you will need to do this, and everything that I used can be got off Amazon, and most everything else was just tools and stuff that I had laying around at home. The system that I am using is all powered off of XT90 connectors. So in this box I will be adding an XT90 bulkhead to power my fish finder. Some things you will also need are a pair of wire cutters, a pair of wire strippers, and a pair of crimpers. For my bulkhead connector here, I will also be using 4 632 screws and 4 632 nylocks. And I will also be using these 2 ring terminals to attach my XT90 bulkhead to my battery. I'm also going to be using some Permatex gasket maker around my connector when I put it in the box to make sure it is waterproof. You are also going to need a drill with a number 36 bit. That is the bit size that you use to drill out a hole that will fit a 632 screw. You are also going to need a circular saw or a way to cut through the side of the battery box. There are several different methods that you can use to do this. Just make sure that you are doing it safely. Okay, so now that we've got all of our parts and all of our tools laid out, first thing we're going to do here is we're going to fit the battery inside of the battery box. When you open up the battery box, you'll notice inside there's a lot of foam. Most of this foam we will not use, but we will use some of it to help secure the battery inside of the box and prevent it from moving around. Inside the bottom, there's a small layer of foam. I left that in there for mine, so the battery has something soft to sit on top of. In the very top, there's this layer of foam right there. I use part of this, about half of it, to cover the top of the battery to prevent it from moving around. And then this giant block of foam we've got here, I use a small section of it in between the battery and the side of the wall below where I put my connector. That way the battery is encapsulated on all 4 sides. So we've got our battery inside of our box. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take the top layer of foam and we're going to cut it about 1/3 of the way to half of the way, just enough to make sure that it's held down securely. To cut this top piece of foam, I'm just going to use a regular old pair of scissors. Going to mark my foam where I want to cut it, and then just cut a straight line across. Now that we've got our top piece of foam cut, we're going to take this large block that came in the center of the box, and we're going to cut a small chunk of it out. Maybe about that much. Just enough to fit in the bottom of the battery box in between the wall and the battery, but below where I'm going to have my connector. That way it doesn't interfere with that. Now the foam that comes inside of this box splits apart in the middle, but is connected on the outer walls. So split off the size of the chunk that you want, and once you have that split, take your pair of scissors and just cut down the outside. And now you've got your chunk of foam. And then what I did was I just stuffed that down inside. Now it's going to sit down there and keep the battery from moving. And then when the lid's closed, this foam in the top will be pushing on the battery as well. So you can shake this whole box around. It can bounce around in the back of your truck. It can bounce around in your kayak or wherever you're going to use it. And you're not going to have to worry about your battery getting bounced around. Now that we've got our battery fit inside of our box, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to mark the outside of our box where we need to cut it to fit our XT90 adapter. So when we mark our box to fit our XT90 adapter, we're going to want to measure around here and make sure that our hole is the same size as this, but not so large to where your screws don't have any material to go through. So what I would recommend is start small and work your way up, removing more material over time. That way you know it's going to fit and you don't accidentally drill too big of a hole or cut too big of a hole right off the bat and end up wasting your box. Okay, so now that we've got our box marked, we need to cut out the inside of that rectangle. Now, as I said before, there are several ways that you can do this. I'm using a pneumatic circular saw, but there's a bunch of different ways that you can do this that are safe. You can use a hot knife. You heat a knife up with a torch or something that can get it hot enough to cut through plastic. That would work. You can also take a drill and just drill holes right next to each other all the way around the perimeter of your rectangle, and then pop out the piece and then take a file and clean everything up. If you do that, just make sure you start very small with your hole that you make. That way you have material to file away and make it clean without making your hole too big. Okay, we've got our hole cut out, and I cleaned it up with a flat file just to make all the rough edges look nice. So we've got our hole is pretty much the same size as our adapter here. This is going to be a push or a tap in to fit, which is good because that's going to help with our waterproofing. Now what we're going to want to do is take some of that Permatex gasket maker that I showed at the beginning of the video, and we're going to want to run a line all the way around the outside of this connector before we push it in. And then when we push it in, we're going to want to do the same thing around the inside as well. So now that we've ran our gasket maker around the outside, we've pushed our XT90 bulkhead into the box, and that is starting to seal and set. We're going to run another line of the gasket maker around the inside for some extra protection. Now the underside of this is probably going to be a pain. So we're going to have to figure out how to do that real quick. So what I'm going to do for the underside of this, since I can't really get my silicone gun inside of there, is I'm going to take a zip tie that I cut apart. I'm going to squeeze some silicone out on here. And then I'm just going to use this to spread some along the back side of that where I can't really reach. So now that our bulkhead connector is pushed in and starting to seal with that gasket maker, you can clean up any residue that happened in the installation process. And next, we're going to drill our 4 holes for our 632 screws. There we go. Now we grab our 4 632 screws and our 4 632 lock nuts, or nylocks, I guess. So let's install our 632 screws. Now I drilled this hole pretty much just the same size as these screws. Now I did that to help reduce the chance of any water potentially getting inside of the box through the screw holes, which I understand is unlikely due to the fact that they are going to have a nylock on the other side, and they are also a countersunk screw that will be in a countersunk hole. But still, you cannot be too careful when dealing with electricity with the potential of water being involved. There we go. Now I'm probably going to cut to a time lapse of me finishing up the rest of these screws and getting them tightened, because there's really not much that I need to tell you about how to do this. It's pretty simple. Alright, we've got all of our screws tightened up. Now we're going to take our 4 nylock nuts. We're going to install those on the other side, tighten those up, and then we need to trim our cable for our connector here and get it to the right length to fit onto our battery terminals. Alright, now we're going to install our nylock nuts on the back of our 632 screws. So I'm going to time lapse this as well, because there's nothing I really need to tell you about this either. Alright, we've got our nylock screws installed on the back side, all of our silicone on both sides. It got kind of messy. It is what it is. It's not going to leak. That's what matters. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our bottom layer of foam back in. We're going to put our battery in. Then we're going to figure out the length that we need for our cord and cut this to length and then add our connectors. So here we have our wires laid out, and what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to cut them a little ways ahead of where your terminal is at on both ends. So we're going to cut it about right there and about right there. That allows ample room for your connectors to reach your terminals. And then if you look inside, the way I have those wires ran, nothing is making a super sharp turn, nothing is getting bunched up, nothing can get frayed. So now that we've got our wires cut, take our wire strippers and we'll pull some of the wire sheathing back. These strippers are not the best, definitely used better, but they should do enough to get the job done. So when you're doing connectors like these, you want to make sure that your wire is all the way through. That way when you crimp your connector, you know that your connector is biting down on as much wire as it possibly can. That will help make sure your connector doesn't pull off. So now we'll take our crimpers and we'll crimp our wire. I think the crimpers I'm using might be a little bit too small, so I'm going to go find another pair because that was way too difficult. Okay, retrieved a different pair of crimpers. These ones should do a lot better. Now, I've just realized I've made a mistake. We should be okay, but this is something I guess you're going to want to pay attention to if you get the same bulkhead I did. I did not pay attention when I installed this, and I have my positive wire on my right side and my negative on my left. Well, if you look at my battery here, positive is on the left, negative is on the right. So I'm going to have my wires cross over inside of the battery box here, which I guess isn't a big deal, but it would look a lot cleaner if I had paid attention when I installed this and done it the right way. So to anybody who is watching this, pay attention to how you install this. It'll look a lot cleaner than mine does. So now we're going to strip our positive wire here, and we're going to add our connector. Yeah, that was much easier than the first time. There we go. Now we have our connections secure. Give them the pull test, which I always recommend you do when you're doing any wiring. Pull on your connectors. pull on them hard. Make sure they're not going to come off so you don't have to come back and do this later. So, now that we've got our connectors installed on our wires, it's time to take your terminal screws that come with your battery. You get 2 thumb screws and 2 Phillips screws with washers and lock washers. I'm going to opt for more than likely the Phillips screws and the lock washers, simply because they're more low profile, for one. There we go. They're more low profile. And with the lock washer, it is highly unlikely that these are going to come loose at any point in time. So we'll set our thumb screws to the side in case you need to use them for something later on. We're going to remove our plastic covers on our battery terminals. Going to add our terminal screws and install them. And this just uses just a standard Phillips head screwdriver to install them with. So now that we've got our terminals tightened down, our battery in place, our silicone is still drying, so I'm going to wait before I add my block of foam that goes between my battery and my bulkhead connector. I'm going to wait until my silicone is dry, but we can put our piece of top foam in, close down our battery box, and there you go. You now have a fairly waterproof battery box. All of that silicone we added should help that connector, where it is, that connector from leaking. Plus, this has got a rubber gasket all the way around that seals right there. So there are minimal chances of water coming into this. And then here, after this clip, I'm going to include all of the Amazon links and screenshots to all of the products that I used to make these boxes. Like I said, pretty much everything that I used you can buy on Amazon. All of it readily available. Most of it came to me in 2 days after I ordered it. Anyway, I appreciate you guys for watching. Thank you very much. Stay tuned. I will have a lot of kayak fishing videos coming up. That is what this channel is going to be based around primarily. So if anybody watching this video is interested in kayak fishing, specifically kayak fishing in the inland Northwest for multi-species, bass, pike, trout, crappie, etc., please like, please subscribe, and thank you. I appreciate you guys for watching. In the video description, I will also include a link to the battery charger that I bought to charge the battery that I put inside the box. For this charger, I just added a male XT90 adapter onto the cord for the charger. That way, you just plug it right into the battery box there to charge it up. Alright, it is later on this evening and I'm editing this video, and just kind of wanted to show what I'm using this battery box for here. So this is the power cord for my fish finder. Garmin unit right there. So I took and added a 3 amp, don't know how well you can see it, I apologize, it's kind of dark. I added a 3 amp automotive fuse and a male XT90 adapter to the power cord on my fish finder that plugs right into my battery box here that I just finished making. that just plugs in like that. Then I usually keep it in the bottom of my kayak here. Take your screen protector off, and it works.